Hey, what's going on? It's Stephen Platinum, your friend in wrestling, and I'm taking a look at the second Nightmare Factory kind of student show. So, pictures are going to be popping up of the people that I'm talking about. I understand this is a student show. What does that mean? And Cody explained this to us at the beginning, which I thought was very smart. So, a lot of these are people who went through like a 12-week camp. For a lot of them, this is their first match. None of them have a ton of experience. And in that sense, I thought that this was a total success. Everybody from the ring announcer to the referees to the production value to the cameraman, I love this for a student show. I mean, for a student's showcase show, it's the best one I've ever seen. And I've seen a ton. And all of these people are looking to get booked. So I'm going to talk about the relative strengths and the weaknesses as I see them in the various matches and incarnations that they did. And then we'll just get to it. Cool. You know, I love this slick video that they had in the beginning. Just a little graphic, but it lets you know this thing was put together like a show. The finishes were much more complex in many cases than I thought they would be, but I thought that that was great. I thought that that was a great experience. I'm going to talk about, the ones that took advantage of their entrance because they had the backdrop. They would get a moment to sort of get seen, have their name. Some embraced that moment. Some skipped over it. It doesn't mean they're going to be like that for their whole wrestling career. In fact, I would assure you that they are not. But as is the case when I trained wrestlers, some just have it right from the jump, and some have to develop it. And we saw definitely a huge spectrum of both, and a really fun main event to boot. Boom. Right off the jump, we had our ring announcer here. She was great. She very steady, kept that pose. You could understand everything that she said. Steve, that's not that big of a deal. Oh, yes, it is. I hear different ring announcers all the time live and on video, and you would be shocked that how many ring announcers there are that you can't frickin' understand most of the time and who aren't consistent. And she was consistent. She did a very good job. Did not catch her name. My suggestion would be the next time we do this, we put up a graphic of her name at the beginning. It's another way to help people get booked. Or at the very least, maybe she says it herself. Minor note, but so it goes. We go into match number 1, and I thought it was cool that they started off with a solo match. So we had Rude Dragon here against Tripp Jordy. Two really small guys. They weighed in at between 170 and 180 pounds. Not that small, really. I love the music. They're obviously using music that they wouldn't run in any kind of copyright problem with and that kind of thing. And it was somewhat generic, but it was tailored towards their gimmick. At least it led you in a proper direction. Faces and heels here. We know what's going on. We know Rude Dragon's the heel. We know Tripp Jordy is the baby face. And I mean, a white meat cherry baby face. And that kind of clean storytelling, along with a lot of people in the crowd. And the people in the crowd were obviously students and supporters of the school and students that continue to train at the school, and the atmosphere was really raucous and the energy level was really high. They could give the people at ringside for AEW, for things like Dark, those wrestlers, a run for their money. And it made for a really fun atmosphere. It was much better than having nobody there. I think it's very smart to have a crowd and have some kind of noise that you could kind of play off of, and it made for a really fun atmosphere. I really liked it. That's something that I'm sure they're going to keep, and as well they should. For a Rude Dragon here, for his strengths, his stomps, when he had him in the corner and was stomping him, was definitely a highlight for me. Those were done incredibly well, and his kicks were very good for the most part. I really loved he did this sort of transition from a guillotine choke into a kimura. That went really smoothly and looked very good. That's something that he should continue to do, and he could actually structure matches around that as a heel. And his code breaker that he hit at one time where he was kind of sideways on it looked very good as well. Our commentators, by the way, I believe his name was Luke Sanchez. I'm not sure. And then Ray Glacier Lloyd. Glacier was good at the commentary. He was really good. I only had a couple of notes where I thought the commentary sort of got in the way of things later on, but I'll get to that. As for Tripp Gordy, his strengths, babyface fire. Boy, that's one thing you could tell that they do at the Nightmare Factory. They make sure you need to have that energy, and there's certain points in the match where you need to take it up. And there wasn't a single person who I thought was not energy appropriate, unless they were blown out, which is going to happen. Another thing that surprised me about these matches in general is they tended to go longer than I thought they would, which was a nice surprise. I thought, oh, they're going to have like these 3 or 4 minute matches to make sure that they can just shine and they'll just go through a couple of routines. No, no, no. They wrestled matches. And when I remember to, I'm going to give you the approximate times of those matches so you can really get a sense of how impressive that is. Anybody who's been in a wrestling ring will tell you, like these two guys, and it might have been their first match. They certainly haven't had many. They went 8 minutes, and people would go like, well, what's the big deal? Dude, 8 minutes is forever. 8 minutes is forever when you're new, and the fact that these guys could pull off an 8-minute match, and it didn't get excessively sloppy, they didn't look lost, that's an impressive accomplishment. I can see why they gave these guys a solo match. I could also see why they were the Open, because they did good gimmick work, and they had good energy, right? But sorry, we were talking about my man Tripp Gordy here. Babyface Fire was good. He did this kind of pose thing every so often that I thought really worked. I really liked it. His sling blade looked good, and the super kick finish looked really good. Really, it was the perfect kind of super kick where it didn't kill the guy, it didn't miss the guy. It was good. What can you say? In general, my general notes that applied to both guys, their forearms are good. Their forearms are definitely better than their punches. And that's the case for most people when they are new. And it's the case for most wrestlers in general, because punches are a thing that's really not worked as much, but their forearms looked good. The punches just aren't there yet. Their transitions for different parts of the match, I thought were all good. There was no clunky, okay, I'm going to pick you up and back you up all the way to the ropes stuff. Everything kind of made sense in a context. It felt like, and this was for most of the students, it felt like they were kind of taking what the defense gave them kind of idea. So if they found themselves in a corner, well then hell, let's do some corner spots, right? But they were always in a position in the ring where you want to be. They were either in the center, they were in the corner, they were in the middle of the buckles against the ropes. They weren't in these sort of neutral dead zones of the ring at any point, which again is very impressive for brand new wrestling students. Very impressive that they weren't lost and in the wrong part of the ring. They weren't out of position. The referees in general, I thought were really good as well. I didn't notice them most of the time, which is really good. And they even did some stuff with the referees, like bump stuff and distracting stuff in a couple of the matches. And the referees were down for it. And that was impressive as well. And they actually had a false finish in this match that was very effective and it worked very well. And this match went 8 minutes. All right. Our next one is a 4-way match. Oh my gosh. We got British Wolf, and we've got Marcus Erics, and we got Charlie Angel, and we got Dean. Well, his name will be there. And he had Karma Dean with him. So I'm going to just leave the picture of the both of them up. Karma Dean, who wrestled a match later on, but she served as sort of the manager here. British Wolf, his strengths. Even though that intro was forever, I would not advise that they have the intro go that long again. British Wolf came in at the proper time. It's when the music kicked in, but it took a long time to kick in. But I like that he waited till he should have come in. By the way, their entrance, it was lit properly. They had this kind of fog machine thing. It was pretty good. It was as good as most indies, if not better than most indies. And that backdrop looked great. And I was able to get still shots. Now, on these still shots that you see, if I was able to get a good looking picture, that meant most of the time that they stopped, took their moment, got their moment, got their pose, and then moved on. Some of them, because they're understandably nervous, would just blur by. And so I got the best picture that I could. So if you see a picture that's not so good, chances are it's because they didn't take that moment to take their proper introduction, get their moment. You want to do that, right, on an entrance. But that's all part of this learning process. And I think that's really cool that they're really getting a full experience, including the idea of television and working towards cameras, etc., etc. It's clear you get like a very thorough wrestling education at the Nightmare Factory, and I'm all about it. The British Wolf, that's the guy who's ready to book. I'll just say that. He's probably really is from the UK and came here to train and do this. And he's a guy, he waited for his music to kick in. He's got a good look. He's got more size than the guys we saw in the first match. His drop kick was great. His strikes were good. He did this awesome dive that was completely fearless. This guy's good to go. I think that this is a guy that you can book and put on your show in a one-on-one match, and he'd be able to get through it. No problem. I think that this guy's just ready to go. You don't have to worry about him. And he's just going to pick up experience wrestling in more and more matches. Not to say that he couldn't use more training. Anybody could. But British Wolf was the guy I saw in this four-way match that I just went, he's good to go. And he's ready to start wrestling on the indies for sure. I would advise if you can get him booked, book him. I think he's the kind of guy that will add to your show right off the jump and will learn very quickly. That run to a splash I thought looked really good. He looks refined is the notes that I put with him. And he sold really well, especially when they did this part where all four of them were down. I thought his selling was the most effective. Cool. Marcus Erics. That hair was wild, yo. The Dragon Ball Z kind of like spiky hair. That was wild. He's another guy that had a little bit of size on him, and it was good. His selling was really good, and he was always in the right spot at the right time. And he was a wild man, dude. Like, when he had the energy, boom, he was right there for everything. And he kind of led the way in a lot of, like, the one-on-one matchups that would happen in this match. He did get tired, but this was notable to me, and this is something that a lot of people wouldn't notice, but I noticed. He found his second wind. And this might have been his first match where he ever had to do that, where it's like, we still have 2 minutes left to go. By the way, this match went 10 minutes. That's a long time. Long time for your first match or one of your first matches. And he found a second wind and got them through that finish, which was awesome. Charlie, yeah? His look was on point. That hair is crazy. He had face paint. I thought it was a good accentuated look for what he was doing. He was very animated. When he hit a spear, that looked good. He ended up winning the thing ultimately. It was a complicated finish, which it looked a little clunky, but I loved that for the student showcase, instead of just going for standard, basic, easy stuff, they did stuff that was closer to the kind of complexity of finishes that you would see on the indies, especially in a four-way scramble, or in wrestling promotions that you would see on television. I didn't hate that. Let's talk about Dean and Karma Dean, right? Karma Dean took the mic, cut a promo. It was pretty good. Again, it's just one of those things that's just going to come with experience. The strikes from my man, though, were good. Very good strikes, in fact. And again, another guy that had good energy. And I think when he gets out there and gets more experience, it's going to come to him for sure. General notes, and I got to say this for everybody. Everybody's gear was on point. Everybody looked like a pro wrestler. And whoever's doing their gear is doing a great job. Whoever's doing their gear should be hired to do other people's gear. It looked good, right? It's a good reflection of this school, by the way. Yeah, so that was that match. Match number 3 was a tag match where you had the Bodyguard and the Diamond Sheik. The Diamond Sheik. My favorite gimmick of them all, the Diamond Sheik and his Bodyguard. I thought that was cool. Would I have had them come out together to make it clear that he was his bodyguard? probably, but I understood that a lot of this was about what kind of presence could they generate by themselves too. And and the other ones, Aaron Dallas, right, and Aaron Kirk, the Aarons. Individual notes. So the bodyguard, Austin Green, he can't go by Austin Green on the Indies because Austin Green isn't that like Megan Fox's old boyfriend, the guy who was on 90210. Yeah, you don't want to be Austin Green, but billed as 6'5", 300 pounds, and he might be that. And he was. Let me talk about him because he's the guy that like I saw him and I just went, that guy's ready to go on a show. Size alone, he's ready to go on a show. But it also helps. He had a great presence. I loved his demeanor. He moved at an appropriate pace for the whole match. What are you saying, Steve? He was slow? Yes, he was slow. But at one point, he goes into a full run, and at times he had to pick up the speed, and he could do it. That guy's like genuinely athletic. They said that he played football, so I believe it because he wasn't just slogging around the ring. That's a guy who's got potential. That's like a Will Hobbesian kind of guy who I think really has potential. I would book him right away at PCW and use him. He took the bump that he took was really good, right? He took this bump out of the ring that looked fantastic. His power bomb where he yoked the guy up to save the spot looked good. And he was fast when he had to be, which was impressive. Now, the Diamond Sheik obviously his physique was not the best. They said that he had lost a lot of weight throughout the camp, which is awesome. He was also very awkward in terms of the physical stuff in the ring. That's going to come with practice, but he was more than willing to work the gimmick stuff. I thought was great. And even the thing where he was trying to pay off the referee and then got the money kicked and it went flying everywhere. Like, you have to bring energy to any kind of comedy spot. And he did that, definitely. Right? There were two people who I put down this note. As soon as they came out, I just wrote down feeling it. And Diamond freaking Sheik, I felt it right away. I was just like, I'm in. He had that presence as soon as he came out. He took his time with the camera. He took his time walking around the ring. He was doing this thing where he was passing out diamond necklaces to the crowd. I love that spot. I love the spot where the third guy was hesitating, so the bodyguard grabbed him and made him accept the gift. I love that kind of stuff. I think the more of that kind of stuff you do at this level of the game, the better you're going to be with whatever gimmick you end up doing. I love that kind of interaction and that kind of performance. He was definitely down. He made it clear that the bodyguard was his bodyguard, and they established that dynamic early on. The finish was he hits with the rings, and that was okay. And he won ultimately with a reverse DDT, which looked fine. I mean, obviously physically, I'm not gonna say like Diamond Sheik is ready to go in your indie. I would say if you used him in a capacity, you definitely could do that. He's not somebody who's going to shy away from performing. But Bodyguard is a guy that I would use in the ring right away. Cool. As for Aaron Dallas, the babyface, good look. I like that they said that he was a steel worker in real life. He hit a DDT at one point that looked really good. I'm sorry, did I say the Sheik won? They didn't win. These guys, the Aarons won with a heart attack. Picked him up, clotheslined him, pinned him. Aaron Kirk, who they called the family guy, so they kind of pushed that he did wrestling before, but now he was getting back to it. Everything about him was really good. He took the heat for most of the match and did a good job selling and that kind of good stuff. Again, two guys who I think are solid, have shown that they've been trained, and then are going to get better with experience. Yeah. In general, the referee Paul did a good job in this match. I thought a really good job. The fact that I singled him out and found out what his name was tells you. Really good job for Ref Paul. I thought the part where he held the heels back so the baby faces could make their entrance appropriately and be in the ring with the heels there. It's a small touch, but I think it's good because it doesn't make the baby faces look dumb, nor does it make the heels look bad. So the referee did those little things that helped everything feel like it made sense, and that's what a referee is supposed to do. The match was very stilted at first, where you could tell they were thinking about what they were doing, which is very common amongst new wrestlers, right? But then once they got into the flow, training took over. You could see it happen. The training took over, and then they just did their match. And they looked like they were having some fun with it by the end, which is really where you want to get to, right? Like the guys that were in the main event, you could tell they were just having fun, and it made the match good. And these guys in this tag match, once they got into the flow, they were all good. We had another tag match here. The four ladies that are training, right? Hyena Hera, Karma Dean, who we saw managing earlier, Spencer Kitts, and Julia Hart. Julia Hart, who I've already seen on AEW Dark. Apparently she was a big-time cheerleader. They said two-time world champion cheerleader, so maybe for college or what, that kind of thing. And then she was on the Blood and Guts show, losing to Britt Baker. And I see it. Julia Hart's already got the pepper, and it's already like, book her and get her on your shows. Yep, that's Julia Hart. As for the rest of them, Hyena Hera was the most nervous out of all of them, right? But her selling was on point. Even for the people that were nervous because it was one of their first matches or their very first match, you could tell their training would kick in at a certain point, and they would just rely on doing individual things well. And so Hyena Hera's strength was selling. Once she just got into selling, she got into the flow of the match, it was good. She hit a backbreaker at one point that looked really good. She took good bumps, especially on the hot tag. When that hot tag happened, she came in, she was Johnny on the spot, boom, 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 boom. Her strikes by the end got to be very good. And then that wheelbarrow facebuster she pulled off looked fantastic. So she's hitting the big stuff. It's just going to take ring time and becoming more comfortable, period. Yeah. As for Karma Dean, she feels comfortable performing. The ring stuff, that will come more. But she's not afraid to kind of stick it out there and talk and do that wrestling thing. And that's just an intangible that she has. I could see why they had her as a manager earlier, because she's the one who's like, I'm going to do this wrestling thing. And so whatever I'm asked to do, I'm just going to go out fearlessly and do it to the best of my ability. You love people like that, right? Her Boston Crab was good. They did a complicated finish with like a dry erase board where it got kicked into her and all that kind of stuff. That definitely looked wonky, but I love that they did it. Spencer Kitts, the promo was good. The sort of baby face like promo where she kind of cut like a battle rap kind of thing. It definitely had a flow. It was good. She has a good presence. She nailed a 619 at one point. And she's very athletic. Spencer's Kitts is like the one word I wrote down here, potential. Like, just gets more experience under her belt. I think she does, get her out there doing indies and wrestling different women that she can learn from. I think it's all good. But Julia Hart, she's ready to go. She's ready. They're using her on Dark. They're going to use her at AEW here and there and everywhere. I could see why. She looks great. She's got a presence. You could, through the cheerleading thing, she's not afraid. She's someone who had her head up constantly, so you could read her facial expressions. She was always connecting with the camera, with the audience that was there. And she carried the entire end. When everything was kind of unraveling and kind of going to crap a little bit, Julia Hart brought it back and made sure they got to the finish and did their thing. Way beyond her experience to be able to do that, to pull the match together and to get it to the finish. I could see why Julia Hart's already being used and stuff. Yeah. The referee for this one was Ray, who was good. He was there for everything. This match went about 8 minutes, which again, for your first match, that's a lifetime, and they did just fine. Just 2 more matches. This is a battle royal. And there were a lot of people in it, so I'm just going to get to the individual notes about them because I think that that's the most interesting thing. and then talk about a couple of the bigger spots. So you had New York Menace and Jacob Thomas and Lewis Lessons and Charlie Platt and Jay Brady and Haya Lobo and Chris Martinez, who ended up winning the thing, and then Liam Hazan. And then you also had Nidha and then Jacob Thomas became Jet Dade for a comedy spot thrown in the middle of this battle royal, which I thought it was good. This was the one where I thought the commentators were the least effective, and it's understandable because there's so many people in play, but they definitely talked over the intros of the wrestlers, which was not good. I get that they wanted to give you like a little bit of thing about each one of them. It wasn't the time to do it when they're talking over the next intro. That's my big note. Don't talk over anybody's intros. Keep in mind, this battle royal went 15 minutes. So those last 3 or 4 guys that were in there, and then Charlie, who ended up winning the thing, had to go 15 minutes. In a battle royal, that's a lifetime. They definitely put the guys in here that had maybe were the least proficient or had the least amount of experience in a battle royal. But then they had to go 15, and they had to make it look good for the whole 15. All right, just general notes. New York Menace took that big bump through the plastic table, and he did it perfectly. He had one spot to absolutely nail, and he nailed it. So good job, New York Menace. Jacob Thomas, he took a good bump over the top when he got thrown out. And then I might as well talk about him as Jet Dade. So Jet Dade did a thing where he's like the party guy. He had beer. He set up a beer pong table, which was ridiculous. He had some from the crowd try to throw the ping pong ball in, and they missed. But he was like, no, you got in anyway. And he's like, hey, he's a beer. And then he finally got into the ring, and he got thrown out right away. Exactly the kind of comedy spot you would see in the Indies or in the Royal Rumble, where the guy comes out, and it's more about the performance that he's putting on than the in-ring. And that was definitely the case. I thought it was cool that they had that spot and an excuse to have a table out there for New York Menace to go through. Great stuff. Jet Dade. I would definitely book Jet Dade. Jacob Thomas is generic, but intentionally so, obviously. As for Lewis Lessons, at times he wasn't comfortable, but he was the most nimble. He was the one who did spots like scamper up the ropes or bounce off the ropes, and he was very comfortable doing that. What caught me by surprise. That was the main note that I had, that he was very nimble. Charlie Platt, he was the first one when they introduced the first 3 guys, didn't look at the camera. Charlie Platt looked at that camera. You could tell he was invested in the moment of, I'm going to treat this like a real pro wrestling match. And if this is a battle royal with 8-9 dudes in it, they're going to remember me. Smart. So that's what he connected with the camera. And his go behind German suplex was my favorite spot as far as like a wrestling move delivered for Charlie Platt. JD Brady, he sold Menace. And a lot of guys fake what being a heel is and fake being menacing, and you can feel it. JD Brady genuinely sold a menace to me. And and he had one of the other funny spots where it was just like, you know what, I'm tossing myself out rather than face New York Menace. Like, he sold that, like, I'm scared of New York Menace. That put New York Menace over more than anybody, is his ability to just sell it. Like JD Brady, I would imagine he probably doesn't have very much experience in that kind of thing. So they just gave him this cool spot to do. But if they give you one thing to do it really well. And JD Brady most certainly did that. Haya Lobo, the mask guy, he struck a pose when he came out. That was my main thing about him. And he was one of the guys they had stay in there until the end. So he was kind of directing traffic a little bit in there and made sure the things came across, which is important. Chris Martinez, the Spanish Nightmare, he ended up winning the thing. He was perfectly serviceable and perfectly good, and I could see why they had him stay in for the duration and win it. He's another guy who I noted he found a second wind. He definitely got tired. He was in there for the whole Battle Royal, but he got a second wind, which is something that you love to see, and it's a reflection of his trainers that was able to happen. Yep. Liam, his forearms were good, his chops were good, his kicks were good. He was in there near the end. Yeah. Um, and his last bump was a really good one to get ousted. It was really good. And to be able to pull that off, and he's somebody else who was very stilted in the beginning, but then as they got into the flow of it, he got more and more comfortable. I could see why they had him in there at the end. Cool. Needha, good forearms. That was my big note. Needha had the good forearms, right? Really solid, was running around, keeping it busy, making sure that there was never a time where the match just went dead. Battle royals, especially with newer people, especially at indies, there are all these kind of dead spots. I will say this, for a 15-minute battle royal, there weren't dead spots, which is unbelievable. Unbelievable, actually. And then Jet Dade setting up that beer pong table, all this, ridiculous. And that bump completely worked. The fighting on the apron at the end, I thought really worked as well. Really good. So that's the Battle Royal. And then finally our main event. And I just noted that the ring announcer was up for the main event. She did a good job all night, but for the main event, took it up, as you should for the main event. That point toe pose that she does, I think that's her go-to, and I think it's smart to have a go-to. Obviously, when they train you at the Nightmare Factory, they worry about everything, and you should. That's the main takeaway from this whole Nightmare show, is they're getting trained well, and that's a great thing. But your main event, you want to have your really good people out there, and they did. So Dean Alexander and this girl who they never named, which is first I was like, oh, they didn't even say who she was. But then there was an obvious reason for that. So I'm just going to put Dean's picture back up there because she's not out there that long. Dean is the other one that I wrote feeling it. As soon as he came out, I was like, that guy's good to go. And I've seen him on I watch every Dark and Elevation and review them and that kind of thing. And I've seen Dean Alexander on there before. And I could see why. Apparently he was in the first show. He was the main event of the first show, so the story they were telling was like, I was in the main event of the first one, and now I'm in the main event of the second one. I'm awesome, right? But he didn't win in that first match, so he was looking to get his win. But I was feeling Dean Alexander, right? The spot where he's got the girl, and then he just drops her was so great. Someone needs to rip that spot off. It was so great. Established the guy as a heel. The crowd chanted, "You're a jerk," which got a pop out of me. I love him. I'm a 2-time main eventer. And then Dylan McQueen. I mean, I'm a big Dylan McQueen fan. I was so excited to see Dylan McQueen against QT Marshall, where Dylan hung in tough. I mean, got his nose bloodied and all that stuff and hung in. I'm a big Dylan McQueen fan already. Both of these guys should be booked on the indies. You should be booking them. You should be giving them more ring time. They're guys who you can just put on your show and get it going. I'm going to give my general notes about Dean first. The boot is great. The kiss spot that him and Dylan McQueen did ruled. Dean is strong. Deceptively strong. At one point, he caught Dylan on a crossbody low and was able to kind of yoke him up, right? The low blow spot behind the referee's back and then hit him with the crossroads looked really good. It was a good falsie, too. McQueen managed to kick out. I love the spot where Dean was caught in a submission, so he grabbed the ref and slammed him into the mat. And the falsie after the drop kick I thought worked. His promo definitely worked. We'll get into the post-match stuff, which was a lot of fun and really unexpected. Dylan McQueen, the rose petals entrance. Somebody please do that for him constantly. It was fun. They had 2 girls dressed similarly who just threw the rose petals out. Dylan McQueen feels like a star. I mean, a couple of the guys I said feeling it, but Dylan McQueen is a star. I just wrote down star, underline. His response to Dean Alexander going, I'm a 2-time main eventer. And then Dylan McQueen going, but did you win though? It, again, just delivered one line. But if you have one thing to do, do it to the best of your ability. And he nailed it. And it created a different energy. That's what stars can do. Dylan McQueen, like Julia Hart, was somebody whose face was constantly up, and you constantly could reference how they were feeling, how they were doing, because you were constantly seeing their face and they were performing, almost like silent movie actors. It was very blatant, eyes open. You could tell whether Dylan McQueen was hurt or whatever. I wrote a note down here, which is as big a compliment as I can give anybody, which I said gorgeous George-esque. The way that Dylan McQueen's hair would become more and more disheveled, but he'd use that in the match. There was a kind of like aura, and I'm not talking about because Dylan McQueen like has like a gay gimmick or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that's why Dylan McQueen is gorgeous George-esque. I'm talking about an aura and a feel. And, you know, just this idea of, I want to watch you and I want to see what happens to you. And I am, if you're the babyface, I am rooting for you. He has that. I book him on your freaking show. Yeah. That heavy bump that he took off the second rope. Wow. The Dylan McQueen fire up was really good. And the chops were good. The clotheslines were the weakest part of Dylan McQueen's game. And the clotheslines in general, I noticed, and that's a normal new wrestler thing where they're afraid to make that contact and make it look good. That's my general note is people, they got to get the clotheslines better. But his flying shoulder looked great. The kip up was really good. His expressions were on point. That schoolboy rolled into a single leg crab, I thought was one of the best executed, along with the person who did the guillotine transitioning. It was one of the most mat wrestling things that looked the best to me on the whole show. My general notes for the match overall. Dan is a good ref. Yeah. I love the spot where the ref caught the feet on the ropes when Dean Alexander tried to use them for leverage. The superplex looked very good. That's a big spot. And they used it for a double down, which I thought looked good. When they traded blows, it was the only match that did it, and it was the one match that deserved it, and it looked good. The double ref bump thing was ridiculous, and I love that they did it for this showcase because it showed that the referees could work, and they could work a complicated... This was the one, they had a few complicated finishes in different matches. This is the one where it worked the best. Yep. Where they pulled it off. Yeah. And then after Dean Alexander lost, he's cutting a promo. And by the way, the fact that Dylan McQueen was able to slip out of the ring and let the Dark Order have this moment, that's a skill. The ability to give up the stage and not distract. Especially if you're the babyface that just won. And people go like, oh, that doesn't matter. Oh, it matters. Because it means you're thinking about the show more than you're thinking about yourself. Which I really like about Dylan McQueen as well. But there's -1. What? And then 10. And then 5 Allen Angels of the Dark Order. What is going on? They you know, 5 with the spinning kick. Allen Angels. Dude, that kick was bananas. It looked great. Holy crap. Do that kick all the time, Alan. It was great. Dean sells that well. Takes the kick from -1. And then 10 hits him with the spine buster. Really, 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 really good. Really good. And then -1 cuts the promo. What can I say? I thought it was very successful. I know this video is very long. All told, it's going to be about 40 minutes. But I really wanted to give each person, have something to say about every student that wrestled in this thing. I thought it was a lot of fun. I think if this is supposed to be, and according to Cody it's supposed to be a showcase to get these guys booked. I told you what I thought about different guys. Could you book any of these people? Sure. But there's some that are like ready. You could just throw them in a match with whomever. And other ones who could definitely learn from being in there with somebody with more experience. But they're obviously getting trained well. That's the my big takeaway from this thing. In any case, it's Stephen Platinum, your friend in wrestling, taking a look at the second Nightmare Factory Showcase show.